I was saying they're going to kill you because they're going to A, get fast because AI will make it easy, and B, they're going to understand their ability to absorb risk is greater than yours and they can outbid you. And he thought, oh, that'll never happen. And his wife, bless her heart, says, Bob, it's a good thing he's 75 because he won't be in business when your prophecy comes true.
Hey, welcome back. That was Bob Perkins, who was head of marketing at Calvin Klein. He was CMO at Pizza Hut and drove record sales there. He was head of marketing and EVP at Playboy, also a political fundraiser, which I used to do. It's where I met Bob. He started chamberbiz.com within the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for less than $2 million. They sold that for $23 million. And Bob was also president of Chiat+Day, which is the ad agency that ran what is probably considered the most successful and best advertisement ever, the 1984 commercial at Apple. He was head of Chiat+Day, and he was there when they did that. But that's actually not why I brought Bob on the podcast. He's been a mentor of mine for a long time. I wanted to talk to him about his thesis that the companies that are going to win right now are not going to be the companies that have the best strategies and the best planning, as has been in the case in the past. That it's going to be the companies that execute the best and adapt and adjust the fastest. And the fact that most businesses that were built more than a few years ago simply aren't built for that. And what that means to the landscape. So that's what we're going to talk about amongst many other things. Let's get after it. Welcome, Bob. Glad to have you. Look forward to diving in.
Glad to be here, and I look forward to a wide range of interesting topics.
All right. We'll try to make it as interesting as possible for everyone. I actually want to ask you a question that wasn't on my interview script, and something based on what you literally just said as we were talking about this. You said something that it was like marketing's not really a business anymore. As you're talking about your background and having worked at Pizza Hut and Playboy and politics and this and that, and you said, well, marketing's not the same business or not much of a business anymore. What do you mean?
I meant that quite literally, actually. So let's back up a little bit. In the 50s and 60s, the world was pretty homogenous. There were only a few ways to reach people. And therefore, if you think of marketing as having two legs, two wings to the airplane, it's got to create the message wing, and it's got to create the pipes to deliver the message. Creating the pipes to deliver the message was not very complicated. 4 TV networks and so many newspapers and so many billboards. I mean, so all the focus was on create the message. The message was created very top down. You got consumers in a room and you did market research. But essentially, at the end of the day, a bunch of people got in a room and looked at all the data they could collect and made a decision. So here it is 50 years later, or 60 years later, let's just say 50 years later, the pipes are all over the parking lot. I mean, you've got more pipes than you can shake a stick at. And the only way you can possibly select those and measure those is a huge amount of AI and statistical modeling. So in the old days, you said, I really like the Ed Sullivan Show. In the new days, you say, here's what all the numbers, here's our target audience. All that stuff comes to you in the form of facts. So you don't need to be very smart to make the decision because the facts make the decision for you. On the creative side, you have so much feedback and you have influencers and you have so many people out there creating messages that it's almost impossible to create a message top down. And yes, brands brands that have been around for a long, long time eventually develop a patina. They develop a sheen. Pick Nike, pick Pizza Hut. It's not the old get everybody in a room and figure it out and do it. It's more watch what's going on in the real world and then press ahead and do more of it. And now you have synthetic audiences. A good friend of mine is creating a synthetic audience. It's top secret, so I won't tell you the audience of the idea, but he's picked a very specific group of people. Let's just say he's picked advertisers in the pizza industry. He's developed a synthetic audience of pizza eaters across the country, and you could run every idea against this synthetic audience and get do they like it or do they don't like it? So the business has really changed dramatically, and I just read a McKinsey study that said marketing is going to be one of the first industries totally consumed by AI. And I think that's why. I think it's becoming much less creatively driven and much more factually driven. And while that has lots of I'm not decrying that. I'm not saying that's bad. This is not a rant against the future. This is just an observation that marketing is a very different business than it used to be and will be unrecognizable in 5 or 6 years.
In your view, does that mean the value of being creative or the creative aspect of marketing, is less valuable today?
I just did a post recently, and I'm not getting into the posting business, but I've been screwing around. A golf instructor can tell you how to hit a bunker shot. Only you can hit a bunker shot. To the extent that creative is telling you what to do, it's going to get done by AI. I mean, I think the old view of, boy, machines can only be creative suffers from from a really consistent fallacy. And I've talked to a lot of my buddies in the advertising business. And I don't know if you saw this recently in San Francisco, an autonomous vehicle, a Waymo cab, hit a 7-year-old kid who darted out in front of a parked SUV. And what the statistics show is the Waymo slowed down and hit the kid at 7 miles, and a normal human driving at the speed limit, which of course no one ever does, wouldn't hit the kid at 15 miles an hour. So what's your criterion in this case for success? Is that you never kill somebody, or you killed fewer people than human drivers? Applying that to creative process, what's your success for criterion? Is this one of the 10 best ads ever made in the world? Probably not. Is this better than the average ad? Probably. And are you willing to spend $3 million for a crapshoot that you get one of the best ads ever made? Go through your history book and see who made the 10 best ads last year and ask yourself, was that worth the money? And I think in most cases, particularly, this goes back to the pipe issue, because there are so many pipes, you now need 40 ads. The idea of, when I was at Chiat Day, we created 1984, which was the first Super Bowl ad ever made. It wasn't the first Super Bowl, it was the first ad that made the Super Bowl ads. I mean, it was really probably one of the best ads in the history of the world. The board of directors of Apple didn't want to run it. They got bamboozled into running it. And B, the next year, the same group of people did the worst ad ever made in the history of the Super Bowl, called Lemmings. So Apple has the best Super Bowl ad ever made and the worst Super Bowl ad ever made, back to back, by the same people spending the same amount of money trying to do the same thing. When you think of risk analysis, a lot of sharp bean counters are going to say, hey, the risk ain't worth the reward. And it's going to be hard to argue with them, because they're going to have a spreadsheet that Claude has pumped up that is pretty detailed. So I think marketing is going to disappear, except what's going to become more important is your world, sales. For a long, long time, you're going to have to call a person up and sell something, particularly B2B. At the end of the day, the human touch was really great. Somebody wanted to talk to somebody. Somebody wanted some reassurance. Somebody wanted to know their problem was going to be solved. You know more about this than I do. But the old classic marketing, we're going to create a brand, is changing dramatically. And I think the role of creativity will be just as important, but it won't be human creativity. And in fact, OpenAI is running the Super Bowl ad that's made by AI, they allege. I have no idea. I haven't seen it. And then we'll all say, well, it wasn't that good, but that won't be the right question. The right question is it better than average? And was it worth $3 million to run an average Super Bowl? Worth $3 million to make an average Super Bowl commercial, let alone $7 million to buy the 30 seconds to run it, let alone the $7 million you spent to promote it and hype it and try to get audiences to watch it. I mean, you just don't make a Super Bowl ad, run it. When we did 1984, we didn't do that. We ran a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Don't go to the bathroom in the fourth quarter.
Well, and to your point, it's always learning. It's capable of, like you said, it's always learning, and you're capable of feeding it the data, like a ton of data, and it figuring out, all right, these are the ads that are better. It seems inevitable at some point it figures out what the recipe is for what the 1% ad is even,
You have a client that does, let's say they have 20 sales reps and they do 8 calls a day. That's 160 calls. So that's, whatever it is a month, yada, yada. you very quickly are going to develop a base that you can feed into AI. Every morning you can come in and say, what did we learn yesterday that we didn't know before yesterday? What are the 3 new techniques? What's changing in the environment? How do we need to change our product? When I've done a little bit of that today, it's okay, but it's going to get so much better. And that goes back to decision making. If you came into the CEO's office and said, hey, the last 2 days we've done 320 calls, 32 of those calls have started to focus on this new feature that people want that we've never talked about. I need you to crank this feature in and be able to sell it. We need to be able to sell it. This is Wednesday. We need to be able to sell it on Friday. Everyone's going to go, oh, slow down. And the answer is AI is a probability machine. So the risk of being, let's just say the risk of being wrong is 20%. Let's say you're asking the CEO to spend $2 million. Well, 20% of 2 million is 400,000. The right question is, can we afford to lose $400,000? You got an 80% chance of winning, and the ROI on that is, let's say, 10x. You're now risking $400,000 to get a $20 million return. That should be a no-brainer.
You take the sales piece. So you've got, whatever it was, 20 salespeople, and they're doing 8 sales calls a day. And, to your point, you can use AI today to every day get like a recap and make adjustments. But what it's really doing, if you're a good sales leader, like what it's really doing is it's accelerating what you should be doing anyway, right? Like in the old days, which for me was just like a few years ago, you would take calls and you sit and you listen to them, you make notes, you mark them up, you fill out a call scorecard, you can get through a handful a day, and then you make some adjustments based on 4 or 5 inputs, and you go, okay, but using my judgment, which is like kind of in a vacuum based on my 20 years of experience, we make the adjustments. And you incorporate AI, it's the same process, like it's the same thing that I'm doing. I'm just now able to analyze all of the calls more efficiently at scale and use more than my own 20 years of experience, use that of basically every other sales author and teacher. And as long as I put the guardrails up properly, as long as I train it properly, as long as I've built the machine, the system in a way that gets me a consistent output, then what I'm able to do is I'm able to make those decisions just a shitload faster, right? And it reminds me, as I'm explaining it, reminds me of the post that you had, and I hope you do become a prolific poster, by the way, because your posts are really good. But you had a post recently on the OODA loop, and it kind of ties into this because it accelerates one part of this, which is the analysis. I can get the data faster, I can run through it faster, and I can get more efficient outputs. But there still becomes this other bottleneck, which is, okay, cool, now what? Now you've got a ton of information. What does that mean? So you're a former pilot. So I think the OODA loop the Boyd loop is more important to you, and you understand it more and appreciate it more. Can you share what is the Boyd loop, like the OODA loop, and how does it tie into AI and kind of what we're talking about?
When I was at Chiat Day, one of our early clients was Dell Computer. When Dell was just a tiny little company in Austin, Texas, we sort of adopted the old Avis ad. We're number 2. Avis was number 8 when Mary Wells Lawrence wrote that line, and Dell was certainly not number 2 to Compaq when they wrote that line. Dell had a centralized call center in Austin, because that's all they could handle, all their call center people. And if you had a question, you literally would stand up and yell, who knows how to use Microsoft? I mean, there was a lot of, and there was no bureaucracy. You were just sitting next to people taking calls. And this was the old days. This was a long time ago. And to go back to the Boyd loop, Boyd was a fighter pilot and very good, but he was mostly a tactician and a philosopher, and he was the first guy to really think of air-to-air combat as ballet. So he wrote down every maneuver you could do in air-to-air combat and then choreographed them. If they do this, you do that. And using that, if they do this, you do that analogy, he developed what he called the Boyd loop, which was first you have to orient yourself, because if you're flying a fighter jet and you're upside down, that takes a second. Then you have to observe what's going on. They did this. Now you have to decide what that is, and then you have to do it. So he was known as 30-second Boyd. Because in air-to-air combat back then, not so much now because of radar, but back then, air-to-air combat, this is Korea, you had to get on your enemy's tail to shoot them down. If they were behind you, they were safe. If they were in front of you, they were your target. So he could get on their tail. He could get behind any fighter pilot in 30 seconds. That was his claim to fame. So you and I, Ray, have been in business a long time, and I've been around a lot of businesses. And what does everybody say about any company with more than 100 employees? Well, it became bureaucratic. Bureaucracy slows down decision-making. Organizations become risk adverse. The Boyd loop, if you say, okay, we're observing, this goes back to what I said earlier about risk analysis. AI makes risk analysis a lot better, so it should be easier to decide, hey, we can make 20 million, we can lose 400,000, we can afford to lose 400,000, let's do it. That should be a decision that takes no time, not we need to get the finance committee together, we need to talk about this. Because once the action happens, the people below you, as a rule of thumb, are used to doing what they're told. Business has built a squadron of people who are used to doing what they're told, and they're generally pretty good at it. That's why all these companies are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, because they've got 90,000 people, 88,000 or 89,000 of whom are very good at doing what they're told. If you think of the arms and legs of a company just waiting for the right instruction, how fast can you get them the right instruction? And AI should make it easier to get them the right instruction, because it should make it easier to observe what's going on, and it should make it easier to make a decision. A classic example, and I won't name names, I was at a dinner party with a guy that owned 4 or 5 very successful regional banks. Good guy. I didn't know him, but we had a lot of friends in common. Great guy. And his wife was the president of a mid-sized university that had been very successful in adopting to the modern ages and has some of the most successful AI tech programs in the country. At this little university, I guarantee you've never heard of. My friend was saying, well, the regional banks will never be displaced by the money center banks because we can make decisions so fast. It's true that in the past, the loan committee at your bank was you probably, and the loan committee at Chase was probably 3 levels of, well, first it's got to go here, and then it's got to go there, and then it's got to go here. But as AI shortens that cycle and gets them more data, and as Chase begins to realize that their competitive advantage with you is their ability to absorb risk. They can make 10 bets knowing they're going to lose 4 of them, because those losses will not sink them even if they're waiting for the victor money to come in. Oftentimes you get a mismatch between when you lose the money and when the winning bets come in. It's like you go to the horse race, they say you have to pay. If you lose, you pay immediately, but if we win, we'll send you the money in 2 weeks. Well, you got to have a lot of money in your pocket to play that game. And that's the way many businesses are. I was saying they're going to kill you because they're going to, A, get fast, because AI will make it easy, and B, they're going to understand their ability to absorb risk is greater than yours, and they can outbid you. And he thought, oh, that'll never happen. And his wife, bless her heart, says, Bob, it's a good thing he's 75 because he won't be around, he won't be in business when your prophecy comes true. As I said earlier about marketing, we've always thought of strategy as a top-down development. So even if, when I was at Pizza Hut, we had 7 regional offices, we had a meeting, a phone meeting once a week with every regional office. Even if the regional office in the Southeast, in the Southwest, the Florida, Georgia, Alabama group said, man, there's something wrong here. We're just not selling as many pineapple pizzas as we used to. There wasn't any way to go back to your note-taking. That note didn't get drug along. So the next time we talked to somebody in the Northeast, are you selling many pineapple pizzas? Well, we never sell many, Bob. Well, I didn't ask you if you'd never sell many. How many did you sell 6 months ago, and how many are you selling this month? Well, it's interesting you should ask. 6 months ago we sold 10, and this month we sold 4. Then you don't drag that to talk to the West Coast. Oh, our pineapple pizza sales are dynamite. Well, what do you mean by dynamite? Well, last year they were 800 and this year they're 800. So, but the rest of your business is going up by 10%. Shouldn't pineapple pizzas be? Those are the kind of things that AI will glom onto in a heartbeat. You can't say, okay, now we're going to give that to Bob and the marketing committee and hope that they get together every 2 weeks and make the right decision. You got to have the flexibility to say, how are we going to react to this information in real time? So the definition of strategy changes.
It's very much along the lines of the post that you wrote the other day that I ended up resharing. I liked it so much. It was about, I think it was in regards to the companies that have been good at strategic planning versus the companies that the competitive advantage is execution based. And, it goes from like this idea of planning and putting strategy and that being what the competitive advantage is versus the company who just says, hey, we're just going to go. And they're just really good at execution and they're more agile and they're able to adapt to it more quickly. And how that's changing within business right now, like the value of strategic planning versus the value of ongoing, more dynamic, more, like you said, like on the fly, like real time adjustments that you need to make. How are you seeing that play out? Or did I misinterpret what you were saying?
I think it's going to take a whole generation of leadership to be able to accept that. I think the average 50-year-old senior exec who's been in business for 20 years and grew up in that world is going to have a very, very hard time giving up what they perceive is their power base. My power base is I run the marketing committee. We get judged by sales. We're doing a great job. I'm going to be fine. What I hear Perkins saying is you got to empower these people and give them the ability to make changes and risk real money. This is not hey, we know for sure what we're doing, and therefore we're going to let these people take a risky path because we can afford it. Trading desks are getting more and more authority, less and less requirement to check in, so to speak, or get approval. More, of course, they're all using all the quant tools God ever could make. And people are beginning to realize the price of that is occasionally some rogue trader loses $10 million, and then you just have to go out and buy your way out of it. But if you make $200 million doing it, that just becomes the cost of sales. What's it going to cost to do business? Well, we're going to have an office, we're going to have people, and we have to set aside 3% every month. So when somebody goes off the rails and does something unbelievably stupid, which is wildly expensive, we have the controls in place so they can't bankrupt the company, and we have enough money in the bank we can pay off the people to make it all right. That kind of change of attitude will take a generation to take hold.
Say you're talking to the 50-year-old CEO today that says, you know what, I do get it. I do understand it. And I'm willing to give up my power base. And I want to move from what's historically been more of a strategic planning mindset to more of a dynamic making changes on the fly. And I want to an execution, from strategy and planning to execution strength. And what changes do I need to make within my organization, or how do I start to make that change, which feels more like almost going from like waterfall project planning, like, hey, it all starts up here and then it rolls down to like agile. Like, no, like we're going to have to do this in sprints and on the fly. If they say I get it, but how do I get from here to there? Like, what would your advice be?
In the software development business, they do a thing called sprints. So usually you have some objective, write a piece of software that does this, and then you chunk it into week. I'm making this up because everyone's a little bit different. You chunk it into week projects. So you have a sprint. For a week, we're going to focus on this, and then we're going to reconvene and figure out what the next sprint is. So I would say you have to do 3 things. One, you have to significantly improve the way information flows up to you, the way it's gathered at the bottom, but more importantly, the way it flows up to you. Back to your call sheet analogy, in those calls that you have recorded and printed out, all the data's there. It's just, am I smart enough? Are there enough hours in the day for me to read it all and understand it all and to discount it? So how do you get information to flow up? Secondly, how do you empower your people that are flowing that information up to you to flow solutions with it? Because in the old world, you did market. When I was at Pizza Hut, we did market research. So we had information flowing up. We had all the sales numbers. We had a lot of smart people working for us, but we were going to try to figure out what the hell that meant and what the hell to do about it. So the second thing you have to do is you have to teach people and encourage people and stimulate people to flow solutions up from the bottom. And thirdly, you have to give people the budget flexibility to make mistakes without losing their job. Now, within limits, I'm not saying blank checks, but I'm saying if you run a Pizza Hut, just go back to you run a Pizza Hut in Des Moines, Iowa, and your sales are off and you have a couple ideas, can you get $500 to try something out? And if the answer is, well, you can, but if you lose it, you'll never get promoted, then it's not a very good system. And then I would add a fourth bucket, which no one ever adds. And this is Clayton Christensen. I would have somebody who spent their whole day, every day, all day, worried about your cheapest competitor. Competitors almost always emerge from the bottom up, not from the top down. The competitor to Ford was with Kia and Hyundai and Toyota. They all came from the bottom up. They didn't come from Chrysler saying, I'm making a $100,000 car, now I'll make a $20,000 car. So most people don't pay mind to those competitors, and that's where the reason you're paying attention to them is, so what are they doing right that I can steal? What are they doing right so I can prevent them from taking me over? And what are they doing that we're not doing? And the fifth specific, comes from personal experience. Don't boil the ocean. Go to management and say, I want to take the Southeast region. At Pizza Hut, we had 6,000 stores, and I had them chunked into 10 groups of 600, and then I had those 10 groups divided into another 10 groups. So I would go to one of those little groups of 300 stores and say, hey, I know the general manager out there. He's a good guy. I bumped into him a couple times. She's willing to participate. Let's just see if we can make a test case out of this. The idea that you're going to get the whole organization to shift overnight is a pipe dream.
Well, it ties in to innovator's dilemma too. Like one of the reasons the smaller, cheaper competitors is like that they creep up on you is because you ignore them. But because they're smaller, they can niche down. They can go a little bit deeper on something. They're more agile. They're more flexible. They're more willing to take some of the sales that you may ignore because you're like, it's a rounding error to me. And they take enough of the rounding errors to create like a genuine force. And then before you know it, you've got a pretty legitimate problem on your hands. And so like you're saying, go to the smaller groups, don't boil the ocean, go to the smaller groups in the same way that a smaller startup is going to go after a smaller market because it means a lot more for me to sell 1,000 pizzas this month than it does for Pizza Hut to sell 1,000 more pizzas this month.
Yeah.
You know?
But my point is, if you get a little regional test bed going and, you're not as threatening to the rest of the organization. If it blows up, it's not the end of the world. And you get exactly that kind of enthusiasm. It's a big country. There are a lot of companies doing a lot of different things. Everybody has their own little problem. I think this idea of starting out on a continuum of the least threatened to the most threatened is very interesting. You got to put yourself someplace. So, one of the things that McKinsey always says is you need a burning platform. If people don't think the business is burning, no one will change. That's why this is such a difficult challenge, because you're talking to upper middle and senior management have been around. They've been successful. Hey, the world is not changing as much as you think. It's understandable. These are not stupid people. These are not people that don't want to succeed. These are just people that, it's like telling a golfer, you just won the Masters, you need to change your swing. And they go, Well, help me out here. I just won the Masters. I'm going to keep this swing for 1 billion years. Well, that's not how it works in the 21st century.
So when McKinsey says that you need a burning platform, is that primarily intended or aimed at like creating urgency within the team for execution? Like, is to prioritize this? If they don't think it's really important and it's falling apart, then they won't do anything?
I think it's, and never worked at McKinsey. I think it's the only way you get senior management to dedicate the resources and the time, and it's the only way you get upper management to feel like this is absolutely essential. Newton got the Nobel Prize for the law of inertia. Things in motion tend to stay in motion. Things at rest tend to stay at rest. And nothing illustrates that better the inertia of a larger bureaucratic organization that's been in business for a while. We've always done it this way. This has worked. Somebody came in and tried to change it 3 years ago. They didn't do a good job. We got rid of them. I mean, it's very tough. The New England Patriots won and won and won, and then Brady left, and then they got rid of Belichick, and then they get a new coach, and now they're at the Super Bowl again. That's the kind of house cleaning that historically has been necessary for significant change. I believe the new model, younger kids will get that model doesn't work because it's never worked in their life. And you can teach people to do the right thing if you would set them right and teach them, but you got to think about a lot of things.
I saw something recently on Bob Kraft, and he said they make bigger changes faster than any other organization that he's aware of at the pitch. Now he's talking about his own organization, so I don't know the inner guts and how it actually works, but he credited the speed of their recovery from the Brady Belichick era to what seems to be like really good unit, at least today, to we make hard decisions faster than anybody else in the or in the NFL.
And that's the Boyd loop. That is the Boyd loop. Hey, we observed, we oriented ourselves, we observed what was going on, we made some decisions, and we quickly acted, and we did that faster than how many teams in the NFL these days? 31 competitors, and now we're winning. I mean, that's the Boyd loop in spades. People underestimate the evolutionary power of the group. Nobody wants to be, when we were on the savannah evolving, if you got thrown out of the group, you died. One of the great examples is there's only one species on the planet that if you take a 2-year-old and turn them loose in the wild, they will die instantaneously, and that's human beings. Every other animal, give them 2 years and they're just fine by themselves. A lot of this resistance to change isn't being a jerk or isn't being stupid. It's looking around the room and saying, gee, if I'm for this and the rest of the group isn't, the emotional DNA in you is don't get thrown out of the group. We often say we want change, but the minute somebody does something that's changed that doesn't work, in particular, we criticize them. If you're going to do change, you really have to, it goes back to you got to give a store owner $500 to lose without any criticism. You really have to think about how do we make people feel this is not threatening to them and to their group personally. If you look at Amazon, and again, I don't follow Amazon. I don't own any Amazon stock. I'm not a stock picker. But I was impressed that Bezos starts groups and then gets rid of them wholesale. Because my theory is, based on no data, that he reaches a point where this isn't as good an idea as I thought it was. And if I changed everything around, I might be able to fix it. But on second thought, let's just start over. A clean sheet of paper and a new idea is more valuable than a crowded sheet of paper with a lot of money spent on it and a lot of people there. Let's just start over.
Have you ever read the book Species?
No.
It's a really good book. Like you would love it. If you read the description of the book, you wouldn't think that you'd love it. But everybody that I know that has read this, and it's highly recommended, but it's about the evolution of the human species. And it kind of ends with a little glance at what the future of it looks like and how we're already kind of just, but
this
it's a
is
thick
Hatari or Yuval Noah Hatari or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, I haven't. I know of it, but I haven't read it. I should have. He's great.
One of my takeaways from it was similar to what you're saying about the power of the group. And it was like, hey, we didn't survive as a species because we were the fastest. We weren't even the smartest. We like, there were all these things that we weren't. What we were good at doing was like banding together. And as a group, we could outsmart and outlive everybody. And we still do to this day, right? And so if you look at what our biological disposition is, it is we're hardwired to want to be in a group, which is why we're also hardwired to like to people please, and it's like a lot of the things that we sometimes have to push against if we want to be objective. But it's all like it reinforces kind of what you're saying about the power of the group, the power of the community. Like we've learned, like that is our survival. Like that is how we evolve. That is how we get ahead, and when we get ahead by the environment, the people that we're around. So I think it supports what you're saying. Like the
Oh
group
yeah,
is more
absolutely. No,
powerful.
no. I've read chunks of that book. I haven't read the book, but absolutely, it's we are hardwired. Particularly living in the United States, where rugged individualism is in our background, and we all want to think we're so tough. We all want to believe that we're immune from that. And of course we aren't. It's just it gives us those paradoxical. There's a great example in The Geek Way. Remember Arthur Andersen, the accounting company, got essentially run out of business because they made many unethical statements. And they knew they had a problem long before they got run out of business. So they hired a PhD in ethics from Harvard University to sit on the management committee. And at the end of the day, she ended up approving all the decisions that got them thrown out. So, well, why? Well, because she'd been there for 2 years and she wanted to fit into the group. And it's not like somebody came unto her and said, lady, if you don't quit yelling and screaming in these meetings, we're going to throw you out. She yelled and screamed and noticed that it didn't go over very well and her arguments weren't very successful. And she said, oh, I mean, it's just human nature. She was not a bad person. She was just misled by her genes, which is probably a whole new book.
The Geek Way is a great book. I heard something recently, and I think it may have been Alex Hormozy talking about Elon Musk, but the question was something along the lines of, why do you think so many tech leaders or so many leaders in business today have what we would call like a neurodiverse, like like an autism or something like that? And the answer was, I think it's because we're so hardwired to do what the group wants, what the community wants, that when you have something like autism, like, even if it's like high functioning autism, your disposition is less in tune with what the group wants. You're much more data focused, objective focused. So you just say, hey, this is what we need to do. And you're in some respects a little immune or a little like blind, oblivious to what other people may be thinking. And the group may go, well, that's kind of rude, or that's not the right thing, or what's Sally going to think about that? And the person that's autistic doesn't think that way. They think in terms like, factual, which I'll readily admit, like this has been part of our, like the Green household. We've like looked into a lot of neurodiversity because of like stuff with my own family, myself. And I was like, holy shit, that makes a ton of sense. Like it's like that you will make the decisions that lead to an outcome because you, in some respects, just aren't as sensitive to the community dynamics. Do you think there's any truth to that?
From the community dynamic pressure. You have a sense of immunity. I mean, you have a natural immunity to it to some degree. I hadn't heard that, but I think that makes total sense. I get that. I get that completely. For reasons that aren't relevant to this discussion, I decided I should have a little morning mantra, like every morning mantra in the history of the free world. You're supposed to spend 2 minutes being grateful. The typical nerd I am, I said, I'll bet I could buy a deck of cards that had something to be, that would stimulate thinking gratefully every day. So I bought 365 cards to stimulate gratitude.
Like prompts,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, prompts. I know that's lame, but anyway, it was a great crutch. I like it. But what I'm constantly amazed by is let's just once a week I get a prompt. Don't care what other people think. Be your own person. Be authentic. So that just shows you how this need to be liked is so permeated all of us that somebody sitting a PhD in psychology sitting around saying, what is a gratitude? What's gratitude? Gratitude is not caring as much about what people think and caring more about what you think. And I think that feeds exactly into what we're talking about. I never thought of it.
So back to Bob Kraft and the OODA loop. So the process of observe, orient, decide, and act. One bottleneck, AI can help you orient, get information. One bottleneck is decide. But then the other part of that is act. And that's the other bottleneck, because if you take what Kraft said at face value and assume it to be true, it's not just making the decision, it's implementing it. And I see a lot of people get stuck at the decision made. It's like they know I should do this thing, right? Like there's this disconnect between that decision and the action. Sometimes it's because, well, shit, that decision's unpopular and I'm going to drag my feet and procrastinate. Sometimes it's because of fear. Sometimes it's because they don't know how to implement it. But do you think, does that become the next bottleneck in the process, I guess, when you think about that loop?
So I read your posts about salespeople, and a lot of it saying you probably know what to do, but you don't do it because it's hard. And therefore, you can get 20 guys in a room and say, small talk is a waste of time, or here's how to better understand what the client's pain point is, or however you want to phrase it. And then I am the salesperson on the phone with Fred, and Fred says, well, what do you think about those Patriots? And I go, boy, I'm a Seahawks fan. And you spend 5 minutes talking about that, and then you say goodbye, and you know you were supposed to not do that. It's absolutely essential that the actions be described in 3 ways. One way, are you sure the person can do it? I mean, it's easy to look at my golf game and say, well, Bob, the first thing you need to do is hit a 230-yard drive. So if you do that, we've observed your golf game. We've oriented ourselves to golf. We've observed your golf game. We've decided you need a long drive. Now go hit a 230-yard drive. That I would not act. I'm totally committed to it. If I could, I would. So are you sure the actions you're prescribing, the people you want to do them know how to do them? Secondly, are you sure that they understand that this is going to be uncomfortable and for a while it's not going to work and we love you anyway? And thirdly, is there a little reward to it? Do this right and you'll see. But no, I think ACT is the most if you go back to the Boyd loop, ACT is the most aggressive form of change in the Boyd loop. We've always observed, we've always oriented ourselves, we've always observed, we've always made decisions. Maybe those approaches need to change, be speeded up, but those are steps that a very small group of people can do very quickly. Acting is getting a lot of people to do what you want them to do. And, a good friend of my wife's is a Broadway, written and produced plays on Broadway. Very successful, a good guy. They rehearse Broadway plays forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And you might ask yourself, why do you have to rehearse so much? Well, because acting is a very difficult task, and it's a skill set. You have to hone it and train it. But how many people have had a meeting with it? In your world, go to a Salesforce, okay, we have a new product today, here's what you say about it, now get out there and do it, without days and days and days of rehearsal and practice and game playing and all that kind of stuff. It's easy to see how acting gets confused with following orders. And it's not a following order game. Now, if you're in the military, you tell everybody to march left, right, left, but you still have to get them on the parade field and work them all day to death to get them to do it. And nobody's resisting you. No one's saying, my mother told me repeatedly it should be right, right, not left, left. I mean, people don't have the skills to do it. That's what I think the new skill set's going to be. It's going to be teaching people how to act, teaching people how to execute. and giving them the constant flow of information to hack and execute better, and give them the flow of the tools they need to do that, that's going to be what separates successful organizations, which is not dissimilar from what separates. That's very important today. When I was at Pizza Hut 30 years ago, they had to make pan pizza a certain way, and if they didn't, it sucked, and if they did, they were successful. But now we're going to ask them to act differently at a much faster rate. It's not that here's what you need to know this year, call back in 16 months.
Taking your history, before marketer in business and politics, you're a fighter pilot, and you're making the Boyd loop occurs when you're at, I don't know what the speed is, 500 miles an hour. And so you don't have the luxury of overthinking shit, right? Like you've got to, you almost have to make decisions. You almost have to learn how to act in the moment. Like you just don't have that luxury. Is that teachable? Or is that something that somebody's kind of born with and gravitates to that line of work, or can you just teach that?
Well, I would disagree with you. I would say that, yes, you're going very fast. There's no doubt about that. But you have to have done it enough times so you can say, they're going left. I have 3 options, 1, 2, 3. I'm doing option 2. It's the ability to sort through and select options quickly, which is the decision part. So you've oriented, you observe, now you decide. But that requires training. The idea that it's intuitive, in my opinion, is overrated. And I have a great example to go back to golf for a second. Somebody once asked Tiger Woods, what's the most important trait of a successful professional golfer? Tiger said, oh, that's simple. You have to like to learn you have to like to practice. And they said, no. Don't you need motor skills? Don't you need coordination? Don't you need a will to win? Don't you need all this other stuff? And Tiger said, look, you need all that. But if you won't hit balls 6 hours a day, 5 hours a week, 5 days a week, you will never be a professional golfer. So you have to love to practice. Regardless of what you're doing, you have to love to practice. And whether it's being a fighter pilot or whether it's being a professional golfer or a salesperson, the practice part is really important. And I'll add something to that that's often overlooked, in my opinion. A friend of mine is a radiologist, and he was talking recently to me about how computers are reading x-rays better than people. And you know why that is? There's a reason for that. The average computer reads an x-ray. In a second, it gets graded because nobody trusts the computer to read an x-ray. So they give it to the computer, then they give it to a radiologist who says right, or wrong, or whatever.
Yep.
The computer learns something. They give another x-ray, it gets graded again. So they have this great feedback loop. The average radiologist reads an x-ray, sends it off, and never hears from anybody again. So there's no feedback. Practice requires feedback. In fact, in the golf world, it's called dedicated practice. It's not just blindly hitting golf balls. I'm going to hit 3 golf balls to the left. I'm going to hit 3 golf balls to the right. I'm going to hit 1 golf ball down the center. And until I've done that successfully 10 times, that's all I'm going to do. So I think we underestimate the necessity of dedicated practice for people who are going to act in our play, whatever our play is.
It's like the difference between driving to work and learning how to drive a race car. Like driving to work does not prepare you necessarily for Formula One racing. Like you have to be intentional. Like you'll get good enough at driving to work, and you're not like pushing the limits of the car and figuring out the turn and being like really deliberate with it so that you can drive better. You're just driving. Like it's a different part of the brain. What's the feedback loop is helpful, especially like from an AI standpoint, and coming back to, you were talking about the Super Bowl ads before, and at Shy a Day and 1984. Have you seen? This is the timeliness of this. We'll make it not evergreen, but it's like we've got the Super Bowl coming up.
Yeah.
So have you seen Anthropic's ads? You mentioned OpenAI has their ad created by AI. Have you seen Anthropic's ads?
No. Are they created by, I assume they're created by AI too.
I've seen a couple of them, and Bob, I've shared it with people. I knew we were talking today, so I've like shared it. I called one of my friends this morning. I said, "Hey, have you seen Anthropic's ads?" He said, "Yeah, dude, I just sent it out to a bunch of people." So like the setting is this woman is sitting down and she's talking to another person. The other person represents AI, right? And she says, "Hey, I want to start a business." And so it's kind of like in AI fashion, like, "Absolutely, I can help you do that. That would be a great idea." Da 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 da. And she says, "Okay, well, I can create a plan for you. Would you like me to create a step-by-step plan?" And she says, "Yeah, yes, please." And so it says, "Absolutely, I'd be happy to do that." And it starts like listing that's like, step 1, you should understand your target market. Step 2, you should do this. Step 3, financing can be difficult with small businesses. So if you would like to apply for a payday loan at such and such, go ahead and click here and it'll be, subject to such and such. And it was targeting the fact that OpenAI announced that they're going to allow advertising on their lower tiers, on their free and lower tiers.
Anna?
So OpenAI came out and said, "Hey, we're going to start doing advertising at some point soon." And there's been this huge debate about it because people go to AI for answers. And now if advertising is part of this, does it start changing the answers based on the advertising? Obviously, Sam Altman says, no, that's never going to happen. There's a whole camp of people say, yeah, like it's pretty inevitable. And I'm curious, as an advertiser, like my thought on this is, once you go the route of advertising being your thing, you change the dynamic of the product, right? Like you change like the product development is a little bit is different. If I'm creating the best product for people to buy that I have to sell retail, or the best product that keeps people attention so I can sell more advertising. And I'm curious, what is your take on OpenAI and advertising in these models as it is today?
One of my favorite lines, as you well know, is tactics follow strategy. So if the strategy is to have a successful business, you need money. OpenAI is not making enough money by the subscription model to have a successful business, as they define it. So they either have to quit spending a lot of money or they have to find a new revenue source. And I don't know if you've seen the statistics recently, but like 90% of the users of OpenAI use it twice a week or less.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. So the idea that you can double the subscription price, it could be true. I'm sure they're running tests all the time. So my view is they're only doing this because they desperately need the money to grow the business as they see fit. And if they had another way to get the money, they would, but they don't. So they have no other choice. And P.S., if you look at all the subscription TV business, they all ran into exactly the same brick wall. There's not enough money in the subscription business to make it unless we have advertising. Netflix will leave aside. Somebody can do it. So I think that everybody will sell advertising because that's where the money is. And the other thing, even though I get does it change the product? Of course it changes the product. What's the alternative? Are you going to pay $100? This is a long, long time ago. The state of New Jersey still prohibits self-serve gasoline stations. But a long, long time ago, when self-service gasoline was just coming to be, a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, he's dead now, was asked to do the research for a gasoline company. If we had a self-service line and a full service line, and the price difference was like 5% or whatever the number was, how many people would pick self-service and how many people would pick full service? So he came back and said 70% would pick self-service and 30% would pick full service. So they went out and built 5 gas stations, put in self-service. It was 95% picked self-service and 5% picked full service, and therefore they got rid of full service. People are cheap. So if given the option, people, by and large, looking around the world at newspapers, at television, at anything you can think of, people would rather see advertising than pay more. So is it unfortunate? It's just, that's the real world, kids. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, particularly in these businesses that have such monster capital requirements. Now, if you said, will there, a friend of mine started the Brave. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Brave browser.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no tracking. It's like, or DuckAGoGo or GoGo Duck, or there are a couple of them that don't accept ads and protect you. And they both are little niche businesses that don't have any traction because they can't generate enough money from subscriptions to pay for the cost of expansion. And the big boys raking in the advertising dollars, particularly because, people talk about how expensive the Super Bowl ads are. So let's say they're $7 million. Let's say 140 million people watch it. So that's 7 million goes into 140 million 20 times, right? I'm doing that math right. So that's $20 a person. You go to Amazon and say, every time somebody clicks on my thing, I'll give you $20. It's a win for the advertiser. They only pay for orders, and it's a win for Amazon because they don't need to show it to very many people. The advertising model is not only the only way to get money, it's a very profitable way for everybody to get money. Because you bet your bottom dollar every advertiser in America is going to open AI saying, guys, if you're willing to put in, and I don't care if you put us in a box, I don't care if you put us in the corner, I don't care what you do with this, because they're not stupid. And look what happened to Google. First they had sponsored links, and then they had more sponsored links. Now they can fill up the whole first page with ads, and why? Because people keep throwing money at them, and we need money to grow our business. We need money to pay our stockholders. We need money to buy a new Learjet for a surgeon. The strategy is have a successful business. Advertising is the most obvious tactic in the world. And unless you have a better tactic, it's going to be the winning tactic. And if you don't like it, you're in a small minority, and somebody will create a product just for you, and go with God.
I agree to an extent. Like, I understand like the nature of like where OpenAI is and the need for capital with where they are. But something makes Claude or Anthropic really confident, because at the end of this, it says like ads are coming to AI, not Claude. So they're putting a stake in the ground. So, and they may at some point have to retract that, but something gives them confidence enough to say on Super Bowl Sunday, like, hey, I'm going to do this. And I know something, I didn't read all the details, but Elon just proposed mixing XAI and SpaceX, I think, like merging those two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elon comes to the same conclusion. We need more money to build this thing. So I'm going to change the model, right? Like I'm going to create a different model that kind of jumps over that need. Something is driving Anthropic to say, we're confident we can do it without. So is it really just a business model choice, like where you've got the other competitors saying, no, not necessarily?
First of all, if you run Claude, you must be wildly frustrated, because you clearly, in my humble opinion, you clearly have a better product. I'm a Claude fan. And I don't remember what I pay for Claude, but it's like $60, $70 a quarter. It's about the same amount I pay for ChatGPT Pro, which is $20 a month. But ChatGPT has, millions of more users. So this is what they're doing, is they sat down and said, how do we get millions of users? There are only two audiences for that discussion. People that have never used AI, or use AI people that use AI infrequently. Let's use that as a better one. And people that already pay ChatGPT. Well, if we can get half of their users to come to us, we know they won't be dissatisfied with the experience. It's a win. So they're just going after competitors' customers. And in 2 years, they'll say, well, we now have Claude Prime and Claude. Claude has advertising, but Claude Prime doesn't. And if you don't want ads, stick with Claude Prime. And we've raised it from $30 a month to $100 a month. And a small group of us will go do that. Not me, but a small group of people will. And everybody else will be a happy camper.
So you think they'll need to retract that at some point? You think they'll have to go to ads?
I think the tactics follow strategy. If they have a different strategy that doesn't need the incremental revenue, they won't. I don't see it, but that's not what I do every day. But they won't need it for a couple of years. I mean, let's just posit that, hey, they may need to run ads, but they got a couple of years before that happens. So they'll worry about it in a couple of years. But right now, it's a great marketing tactic to capture competitors' users.
On the ad-based model, when your attention becomes the core product. So I take like Facebook, and in my mind, purely my opinion, I think of all the social media platforms, Facebook is like the lowest bottom of the barrel. Like you get stuck into the reels or whatever it is on Facebook, and you're just watching garbage of stuff. And I think because the business model is such that says, hey, if I can get this user to sit here and watch mindless shit for 8 hours, then we make a ton of money. And once your attention becomes the product, it changes the product strategy to less about being a good product that people will pay for and more about what can I do to just keep people sitting here. And I don't know. I think about
I understand where you're coming from. And I think, that's the European Union just find, TikTok or they just find somebody a whole bunch of money because they said their algorithm was bad for kids because it captured their attention. It made it addictive or whatever word they use. The flip side of that is name a popular medium, i.e. that's used by more than 20 million people that isn't advertiser supported. Clearly, the presence of ads is not causing anybody to turn anything off. I mean, I think their basic underlying premise is wrong, except as a way to get OpenAI users to come over and try them. I get that. But beyond that, I don't think that's a pitch that works in the general public at all, because there's no evidence. The other thing people forget about advertising is if you are an advertiser, that is your lifeline to business. Whether it was the old days, it was TV, or the new days is TikTok. That's if you're having a business meeting, that's how you get business. If you're a big company, you're desperate to have good advertising outlets. And what defines a good advertising outlet? You defined it, right? It's where people pay attention.
It's definitely way harder to create a product that can survive at that scale. Like there's certainly there's plenty of companies that have done it, but I think it's far harder. And I think in OpenAI's case, again, my opinion, I think it's even more difficult if your product is inferior. Like the faster source to cash is advertiser based model. Like, I mean, the worst websites in the world are littered with the most shitty ads, right? Like it's flush with cash. So, but on the AI thing, we talked earlier, just like the general challenge, like the debate over AI is being misexplained. And I thought you made some really good points on just the current framing and the challenges of AI. And we've talked about some of them, like with decisions and execution and what's going to be replaced. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about from the ongoing debate and the challenges that you see with AI and what you're doing that we haven't hit on?
Well, I think the most interesting question we haven't discussed to launch into an area that neither one of us have anything to do with is, so I have a lot of friends who have grandchildren and children in their early 20s saying, should my kid go to college? Should my grandkid go to college? What should they be studying? I think people that are paying attention are seriously wondering what the right preparatory strategy is for a 20-something. I was talking to my doctor, this is a couple of years ago. AI had just sort of burst on the scene. His son was in medical school and he was about ready to graduate and he had to pick a specialty. So we were talking about what specialties are least likely to be overtaken by AI. And we decided the answer was an emergency room doctor. Whether that's right or not, I have no idea. That's what the kid went into. If you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, gee, Bob, you consulted an AI company. How should I prepare what should I tell my grandchild to do? I had no idea. 8 years ago, I would have said that is simple. They need to master mathematics and they need to learn how to motivate people to do shit. Because if you understand math, you can make any business decision. And if you understand how to motivate people, you can implement business decisions. Learn how to motivate people. I haven't given up on that one. But the math thing, it's not clear to me that's not yesterday's skill set.
Pick which one you'd prefer to answer. It's how do you think AI affects universities in 20 years? And how do you think AI affects politics / political marketing, because I know we both have done plenty there.
So when I was in politics in the previous century, you had to get 51% of the vote to win the election. That hasn't changed, fortunately. But you generally did that by looking for issues that 51% of the people agreed to. The new strategy is you find 10 issues, each of which attract 5%, 10 issues that 5% of the people care about so passionately they care about nothing else. You get 10 of those, and you get a little bit lucky, you have 51%. And AI is going to make it much easier to fragment the voting population. It's going to make it it's much easier to reach them. It's much easier to message test. And AI and the internet and all that other stuff. I mean, lots of things come together here. I don't see it being a positive takeaway. I'm an optimist at heart, and I don't think about this very often, but the lack of common consensus, nobody watches the same news anymore. There are fewer, with the exception of the Super Bowl, there are fewer and fewer things that we all do together. We all have fallen into our own little camps, our own little groups, and I'm as guilty as anybody. And I think AI and the internet make it so simple to pander to, and I use that word carefully, pander these little specific groups. I can see you building a coalition to win the election, but I don't see how you govern that way. I don't see how you get 60 senators and 232 House members, or let's see, half of 435, whatever half of 435 is, to vote for stuff. So I think very perplexed and concerned about that, particularly to lobby for 1 second. I think the biggest problem we have is democracy has failed to figure out how to govern effectively without huge deficits. Republicans run huge deficits. Democrats run huge deficits. The deficits since 1980 have skyrocketed for no real. We haven't had a world war. We haven't had a global meltdown. Solving that problem is going to require a lot of people to sign up for a lot of sacrifice. I was at a meeting recently, a small meeting with a senator who shall remain unnamed, but a moderate Democrat. When asked, do you think we should raise taxes on the rich? This was in a very partisan group. And he said, well, of course I do, but we have a huge spending problem, and I think every dollars of new taxes should be coupled with the dollars of spending cuts, because we can't tax our way out of this and we can't cut our way out. It should be dollar for dollar. You would have thought the guy had farted in the room. I'm sitting there thinking, this is the smartest son of a bitch I've met in years. And the rest of the room is going, that's outrageous. We can't cut spending. It's like, and he's very good at it. He handled it well. But I don't see how you generate consensus for big issues like that in an electorate that's highly fragmented. That's my own bugaboo of the week.
It's reflective of what I've seen since, I've been out of politics for a number of years now, but was in politics for a long time and watched what felt like more of a two-camp system where you had moderates run the room, right? Like the Gang of Eight or whatever it was, like, and then the Senate. And 8 senators had so much power because they were the moderates. They held the cards to now this, like it's become so fragmented and fractured that the fringes now have the authority and have the power, and you just like veer back and forth. And to your point, from a governance standpoint, that's a terrible fucking place to be. Like that's not good for anyone,
An unpaid political commercial. A good friend of mine is a good friend of Mike Dugan, who's running as the independent governor in Michigan. And I've done a lot of research on independent candidates. I've always been fascinated by for other reasons. But that's essentially his pitch. We got a bunch of Republicans who believe one thing. We got a bunch of Democrats that believe the exact opposite. We need somebody who can put him in a room and find a solution. And the only person who can do that is an independent governor. So and he's the real deal. He's the former mayor of Detroit. Was a rock star mayor. He's been well funded so far, but it will be interesting to see, because I've never thought the problem was the election. I thought the problem was the governance. I mean, I've never done any governing. I've always been in the election side of politics, but it always seemed to me is, we'll elect him and you guys over there, you figure out how to run the government. Well, that's just more and more obviously, and this is not a partisan criticism. The Democrats did a terrible job. The Republicans did a terrible job. So I'm very, very skeptical about it.
Two final questions for you. One, if you don't mind me asking, I'm curious. So your wife, Joni, has been, president of Simon & Schuster, has a very successful career on her own. And it's a question I've never asked you, but you know my wife, Sam, really well. And, like in many, many ways, we're so opposite. It's kind of funny, right? In a lot of ways, but I've learned things from her because of how different she thinks and how different she is that have rubbed off on me and probably affected my own viewpoints, many of which I may not even be aware of, but I know I'm aware of several of them. And I'm curious, what has she imparted on you, or what has she influenced your thinking style or your leadership style or your strategy thinking? Like, what have you learned from her, or from this, if that makes sense?
It makes total sense. Well, we're not that different. The thing I admire most about her, and we all make choices in our lives, she has only done one thing in her life, and that's read and edit and publish books. And she was really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like being around a famous artist or a famous musician. Her level of the craft is, because that's all she did her entire life. And I've done lots of things by choice, but I have her respect for the craft is just awe-inspiring to me. And then I think the other thing is, and I think it's not, we don't say this very often in this society, but she's a woman. And so she's much, much more gentle, much more forgiving, much more warm-hearted, if that's a good word. It's just, a funny AI story that I probably shouldn't tell. So I'm president of this condo board, and it's been a big civil war. And so about 6 months ago, Joni came and said, she reads I send her a lot of my emails before I send them out. And she says, "Gee, Bob, your emails are great. They're accurate. They're concise, but you come across as such a jerk. Can't you warm them up a little bit?" And I said, "Okay, honey, I'll try." So I started to write my email, give it to Claude, and say, "Claude, make this warmer." And then I sent out almost regardless of what Claude wrote, I sent it out. I mean, occasionally I made a tweak or two. So about 3 months later, she comes in the office and says, "Bob, I've been reading your emails. You're really developing some empathy. I'm really impressed." I said, "Honey, that's Claude." She thought that was very funny.
That's awesome.
But anyway, I've been with Joni longer than I've been with any other woman in my life except my mother. So I think I've learned to recognize a good deal when I see it.
I've admired the whole arc of your careers is phenomenal. Like, it's really cool. Like, it's from politics to corporate to entrepreneurship to turnarounds to all of it. And you've been a mentor of mine for a long time. And so like I said, I've never not had a conversation even short with you that I didn't walk away with something to think about. And I've thought, man, this is great. And I'm curious, if you could go back and mentor or advise 40-year-old you, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself, or what would you tell 40-year-old you with that experience now?
Don't go to Playboy would have been one of the things that would have said to myself, but that's another story. So I go to the Air Force. I know I'm going to get out the minute I possibly can. There's a time horizon, the days I get out. Then I go to politics, which runs on a 2-year cycle. There's an election a midterm or a president. And I think I started to view my whole life in terms of 2-year chunks. See, I've done this 2 years. Now I should do that for 2 years. And this goes back to what I was saying about Joni. Light someplace a little longer and develop a little more expertise and a little more ability. I always thought of myself as a strategy thinker, not as a leader. When I was at Pizza Hut, they asked me to go run Australia. "You're leaving. We don't want you to leave. Go run Australia. That sounds exotic." And I said, I don't want to do it because I don't want to deal with store people every day. Not that I didn't have store people I liked. I was not a people person. People always used to say, "Bob, you should go into politics." I say, I hate people. So I would have told my 40-year-old self, stay in one place longer, increase your skill set, and go back to what you used to tell kids is lead people in new math. Now it's lead people and do something else. Go back and get better at leading people. That's the skill that I should have developed better. And it's eminently developable. It's not like become a concert pianist or become a professional golfer. It's not a skill that is not easily developed.
And that's consistent with what you said. You know, you even a handful of years ago, you said if there's two skills, mathematics and getting people to do what you need, like getting people to do stuff, still fundamentally one of those things is still basically permanent. Like will have value for forever.
That's what I think.
Bob, I appreciate your time. I know we're up on time. As always, I'm going to go back and re-listen to this because this is very, very fun for me. Like to listen to you talk and like impart your thought and give me some fuel to go think about. Hopefully, it's been good use of your time. And I just want to say thank you and appreciate all the insights and look forward to doing this next time, man.